Hi there, and thanks for listening to the Adulting is Easy podcast. This is your host, Lauren. And today, our goal is to make adulting easier by making money easier, as it always is. Please take a second and hit the follow button wherever you're listening if you can safely do so. And afterwards, please rate and review and everything like that. If you're listening on YouTube, make sure you subscribe and hit that like button. I'm joined today by Josh Schwadron, the founder and CEO of Mighty, a company on a mission to reinvent the personal injury industry by putting injured people first. In doing so, he's become the number one enemy of billboard lawyers across the country. Thanks for joining me, Josh.
Thank you so much for having me, Lauren. So great to be here.
So, to be honest, when I first came across your company, I was surprised that you're really the only ones kind of taking on these billboard law firms. And it makes sense that you'd be disrupting this industry. So, I kind of love that you're providing injured people with a better alternative, lower fees, better service, and doing these things in a transparent way. But before we get into that, our goal for today is to make adulting a bit easier for listeners by discussing a personal finance topic, since managing money is a big part of adulting. So today we're going to discuss the financial impacts of getting into an auto accident. And this topic is really personal to me, Josh, because I was in an accident myself on April 22nd, 2016. I'll always remember that date, I think, because it was very impactful on my life. And I thought we would start, if you're open to this, by me telling you maybe my story, and you can kind of react to it and maybe even tell me how it compares to others.
Yeah, I'd love that.
Okay. I've never told this story before on the podcast. So here we go. So if you can picture this, it was my second car ever. So my dad bought my first car in high school. My mom and dad did. And I had just bought my second car when I was like 24. And this happened when I was 26. So I had been driving this car that I'd saved up for, and it was an Acura, and I really loved it, and I was super proud of it. And so I'd been driving this around for about 2 years. So just to kind of picture the vehicle, this Acura sedan and my age. And I had been working in an office at the time and also been kind of on a diet. So this was Friday afternoon, and I was heading from St. Petersburg, Florida to Tampa, and you have to cross this bridge to do that. And it, like, in order to get across the bridge, you kind of want to get going before 5 o'clock on Fridays. And so I had headed out maybe like 4:30 from the office, and my then boyfriend, now husband, but we had been dating like 6 months at the time. We were meeting some friends in Tampa. We were going to have Red Lobster and then go to a comedy like show. I'll always remember this. And, obviously none of that happened. When you're going over the bridge, there's like this hump, right? So the bigger boats can get through. And from there, which is about halfway across the bridge, all the way to the other side was like stop and go traffic, which is super normal. And just as I was getting to the other side of the bridge, again, stop and go traffic, maybe a quarter of a mile or so of stop and go traffic. And I got slammed like from behind, just bam, and then like hit right into the car in front of me. And you're almost expecting that, maybe if like you're stopping short at a light or you're stopping for the first time in stop and go traffic. But to have been in stop and go for so long, I couldn't even believe that it happened. And so I get out of my car, and the girl that hit me is like freaking out, like crying, whatever. And she's like, the car accelerated by itself, man. I was like, okay, whatever. But like, I was like, you need to get out of the car. Like, our cars were connected together. My car and her car were like connected together. And the guy in front of me that I hit, because she hit me into him, his car was up a ways a bit. But she like wasn't getting out. I was like, we can't move our cars, but we can't stay in them, right? Like, we are on the highway in Tampa. And so that's kind of what happened at the time. You don't know if anything is wrong with you, right? You don't, like, I didn't feel necessarily like I needed to go to the hospital or anything like that. It was just very reactive. Get her out of the car, tell Eric, my husband, now husband, tell him where I am, tell him what's going on. Do I need to call insurance? I called my dad. I remember calling my dad too. And I was like, all right, I'm getting in the car. And I'm looking like over the bridge, and I'm like, he's not getting here. Like, that makes no sense. I was like, Dad, no, stay there. And I guess that's when I knew I was really adulting, when I was like, no, Dad, I got this. Right. But I'll pause there and let you react to it.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, what you're describing happens literally millions of times a year. And what strikes me is you remember the date, the time, the place you were going, exactly how you felt, who you called. And for most everybody, this is a pivotal moment in their lives. It's like on a personal level, something you always talk about before and after. And it's tragic that it happens so much, uh, and it's also tragic that there's not an easy way to move on from it, which I think we'll certainly talk about next. But just to like break down what actually happened to you, it sounds like you were rear-ended, and therefore you have what's called a clear liability case, which means that uh, you don't generally have to prove much about who is at fault, because rear ends are as almost as clear of liability as you can get. So sounds like a case you're not going to lose, as like the first analysis point. But I'm certainly terribly. Um, it's terrible that this happened, but I'm excited to kind of listen more to your journey and hear what happened to you.
So my trunk had popped open, and I think maybe my golf clubs were in there. I haven't golfed since then, like maybe one time because it hurts too much. But I think like my golf clubs were in there, and so my my again then boyfriend Eric, we'll just call him Eric. He goes and he like figures out how to get to, like, I'm going north and he was coming south from work, so he had to try to meet me and like pull off into like this apartment area. But then he kind of had to like frogger his way across the street and whatever. And so he got to me and he was like freaking out, maybe more than I was. But so he got there. The guy that my car hit was there, and the girl who hit me was there. The cops came, started writing up the report and stuff like that. The ambulance did come. I didn't feel like I needed to go. I remember they took my blood pressure and my heart, like in my heartbeat. I remember my heartbeat was like 89. And for me, like that's high. My my heart's like normally like in the 60s. I remember thinking, man, like that's kind of high for me, if unless I'm working out. And then the tow truck came, and what the tow truck did was lifted the front of my car up and moved it forward and put it back down. And so it was separate from the girl behind me. And then he grabbed her car, which was like a Nissan Murano. It was white with a Tennessee plate. And so like then he took her car and he was like, "Do you want me to come back for yours?" And I was like, "I think mine will run." Right. The front was dinged up a little bit, but obviously it was mostly the trunk. So Eric and I both got in my car. We went to where his car was. He had straps in his car, and so he strapped my trunk closed, and then we drove home. And as we're driving home, like again, it's like now it's stop and go traffic going the other way, and all like this is like, I don't know if it's true. It's probably not true PTSD, right? But it's like I was terrified. I'm like, I'm gonna get hit again. Like as like stop and go traffic was coming, I would like stop and then like feel like, oh, is somebody gonna hit me? And I remember that,
Yeah,
and like of course all the sensors are going off. Like what the is going on? Like the cars,
yeah,
the I remember the like airbag sensors were on, but the airbags didn't go off. But I remember like the sensors were lit up and
yeah,
whatever. And so I got the car home, and then I called my mom and dad to tell them like I made it home, whatever. Like, okay, well we're gonna have some pizza, and if you want to come over and hang out. And I was like, no, 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 it's not like that. Like that's not happening. I'm not leaving this house. And we were
yeah.
hungry, right? We didn't get our red lobster, so
At that point, did you realize that you were actually like physically injured, or not? Still
I
not yet.
at that point I don't know if it was like adrenaline was wearing off, but I had a really bad headache. I
Right.
don't remember feeling my neck hurting or my back hurting, which would be my later problems and are my problems to this day. But I remember having a really bad headache, knowing I wasn't leaving, being really hungry, and then Eric like ordering a pizza. And that's kind of what I remember from that night.
Yeah. Do you remember when the first time you actually like felt real symptoms was after the accident?
I think it was the next day. I think it
Yeah.
was the next day. I went to work. No, it wasn't the next day because that was a Friday. So it must have been Monday. It must have been
Right.
Monday where I think probably Saturday and Sunday I was really thinking about like I should probably do something. But like
So
nothing's like really open or whatever. So then come Monday, like I was getting ready to like actually get up and about and go to work. And I'm like, this is not right. And so
your experience, by the way, is incredibly, incredibly common. lot of people who get injured, uh, number one, refuse medical attention at the scene. For example, they say the ambulance, no, I don't need you. Uh, the next day goes by, even 2, even 3 days go by, sometimes even weeks go by, and they don't actually feel what happened to them. The adrenaline's still running, and then all of a sudden it hits them. And one of the big misconceptions that people have is, oh, I said no to the ambulance, or oh, I told the police officer I wasn't hurt, and therefore now that I am hurt, I'm kind of like SOL. But in fact, that's not true. The fact that you were injured in the car accident, even though the onset didn't happen or you didn't feel it happen until days later, makes your injury no less important or causally related to the accident as one that happened immediately.
So I called a friend of mine who was a lawyer, and he was just going out on his own from like a firm, from firm life or whatever. And I was like, all right, this is maybe a good opportunity. I know this person, I trust this person, and they had maybe they were hungrier, right? I had fewer clients. I thought, okay, maybe I can like be important. And he later brought somebody else in anyways who had more expertise who I kind of dealt with. So that kind of ended up being like pointless. And then
Right.
also he sent me to like a chiropractor, but not him or whatever. I don't know. I ended up at a chiropractor, and it was an interesting chiropractor. Like it wasn't a chiropractor who like was kind of typical like adjustments and stuff. It was a kind of chiropractor that just dealt with like the upper cervical, just like the upper two bones, and like did it with sound waves and not actually touching you, which is weird. Um, but who had never had, I was their first car accident case they ever had. So it was a really weird situation where my lawyer kind of wasn't a car accident lawyer. And I did get one later. And then my chiropractor wasn't a car accident chiropractor. So we were all kind of winging it, I think, at the beginning.
Yeah, I mean, I think the most important thing that people can do after an accident, especially one that involves physical injury, is get top quality medical care. And of course, you want a doctor who uh, has experience treating not only the sort of injury, but even the cause, right? Like injuries that happen from car accidents might be treated slightly differently than injuries by looking down at the computer all day. And so having doctors who have that breadth of experience, I think is really important. And a lot of people think that the first thing they should do is run to hire a lawyer. I do think that that is a misconception. The most important thing people should focus on is getting better physically. And so, was that chiropractor that you saw, Lauren? Was that the only doctor you saw, or were there a lot more doctors in the kind of weeks and months ahead?
Yeah, no, there were more. Saw the chiropractor, started getting massages. I don't know if that was like a month or two in. Started getting weekly massages. I got weekly massages for like 6 months. And then it was like every other week for a while. And now it's every month. So for like the last 6 years, it's been monthly.
Before your accident, or was that directly as a result of your injuries?
Oh, I know. I can't remember getting a massage before. Maybe
Right.
one or two or something. No, no, no. That's purely from this. Yeah, absolutely. And then there was a pain management doctor, right? So that was where I got like the tramadol and the muscle relaxers, and ended up with like a temporary nerve block in my neck, and then got a more permanent like ablation from that doctor. And then I also saw a surgeon eventually with the recommendation of disc replacement.
And out of curiosity, like along the way, how did you understand all of this was being paid for? All of these medical treatments?
It was going to come out of the settlement. Like I knew that because
Yeah.
there was a letter. I don't forget what the name of the letter was, but the lawyer gave them a letter, and it was like an IOU, like I'm going to pay you for all of this when I get the
And
settlement.
did your lawyer ever talk to you about the fact that did you have health insurance at the time?
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
And did your lawyer ever explain why you shouldn't go through health insurance or why you couldn't?
No.
Yeah. So I think it's really important that if people do hire lawyers, They actually talk to their clients about the implications of going to doctors who treat on what's often called lien, or I think in Florida where you are, it's called letter of protection. And often what is happening is those doctors are actually taking an interest in your case in exchange for providing treatment. And what typically happens is if you lose your case, you actually won't owe the doctor anything. And because of that increased risk, the doctor feels that they can charge you more. And unfortunately, often it's a lot more. And so, what we generally find is that people are usually better off going through their health insurance. But there's a lot of reasons that a personal injury lawyer might have bad incentives to want to send people to doctors who treat on solely on lien and letter of protection. And so I'm sorry that happened to you, and I'm curious to find out later, like if those bills were large and how much of that ate up your settlement, because just by hearing that that was your experience, it probably ate up quite a lot.
I'm a little embarrassed as a personal finance podcaster that I don't remember the numbers better than I do. I know that I went and all the way through to deposition and gave a deposition. And so I remember that the share that the lawyer got went from 33 to 40% around that time. I don't know if it was demand letter time or if it was the deposition. Again, this is years ago now. So they got 40% and they split it, like my friend and the person he run and split it, I assume. I think I maybe
Yes.
even saw that on paperwork. And I know I ended up with about like 38, $40,000, something like that. And the
And
settlement
do
was 125,000. So I guess we could do some math there and figure out what the medical costs were.
Yeah, so it sounds like you got roughly 20 to 25% of maybe 25%, 30% of the total settlement. And the other 70% went to your doctor, went to lawyers, and went to other companies. Unfortunately, your experience is not uncommon. Those numbers are fairly typical, but one of the things that Mighty is trying to change is a lot of those dynamics. And so I think one of the things I'd ask is, did you have any sense that at the beginning of your case, that if you settled your case for 125,000, you'd only get 30 or 40,000 of it?
I don't know. I'm pretty good with numbers, so I knew the lawyer was going to take some. I knew the doctors were going to take some. I probably would have thought it was half though, if you would have asked me. I mean, certainly at the time I signed the $125,000, once I put my name on the dotted line for that, I knew what I was getting. Right?
Right. Yeah.
I had already kind of done that math, and really the payout I even got was basically for me to get surgery later in life is really what that is slash was for.
Yeah.
Because I was 26 and they really don't want you to start getting neck surgeries in your 20s. I know people that started getting neck surgeries in their 50s and their 60s and they're getting another one, right? So they don't want you doing that. So it's kind of like we'll give you that for later, but then the cost of that surgery is going to go up. And then there's also the ongoing things that I have to do, right? Like my husband and I, we have to have a jacuzzi here.
Yep.
So,
Yeah.
that's, getting the jacuzzi was one thing. And then there's the electrical for that. And then there's, the $90 a month we pay somebody to take care of it.
Yeah.
We have yoga, that we like have to do. And then, the massages. And I haven't been doing a chiropractor really recently, but, and I also like, I don't clean like, sweeping and mopping really bothers my back. I think it's like the twisting motion. So like there's a lot of like I have to pay a cleaner and stuff now that I didn't really do. Like I did kind of in like special occasions before, but now it's kind of a lifestyle thing that I have to do to stay healthy and stay out of pain.
Yeah. So I think the lesson. So first and foremost, I'm so sorry that this happened to you, and it it is really terrible that not only did it happen, but it's continuing to happen. And I know the point of this podcast is around personal finance, I think for me, the lesson that I hear from you, and unfortunately I hear from thousands and tens of thousands of other people that we have experience and data on, is that their settlement is inadequate to compensate them for all of the things they went through and will go through. And the justice system is supposed to help people get back to their pre accident state, get back to normal or their new normal. And
Yeah.
for you and so many others, it doesn't come close. And when you look at the system, you have to ask, well, why is that? And the easy answer, and I think part of the answer, is that insurance companies play hardball and they don't settle cases easily. But I think the less obvious answer, which is what my company Mighty is trying to change, is that personal injury lawyers have bad incentives. And that industry has not competed against each other, has not redefined new standards over the last over decades, and ought to be able to offer a better service to people like you so that you get better medical treatment, you get more of your settlement. Just hearing your story, your lawyer made more money on your case than you did. You're the one injured. That shouldn't
Yep.
happen. That's terrible. And it sounds like there were a lot of things that you could have done differently. And one of the things that I think really bothers me that we are trying to change is so often people who get injured call the first number they see on a billboard, or they call a friend who they don't realize at the beginning actually is financially incentivized on their case. And they make this life altering decision about who should I hire to represent me in a matter of moments.
Yeah.
Most people, the vast majority of people, call one personal injury lawyer and they sign with that person if that person's willing to represent them. And in making one of the most important financial decisions of your life, you ought to do more research, have a better understanding of what to look for, and certainly interview and understand the differences between multiple lawyers. And certainly that's one of the things that we're trying to educate the population about. But we're also trying to redefine the standards of personal injury to make it so that people like you get better outcomes.
There's another aspect to it too that I didn't really touch on, and that's like the mental side of it too. About a year and a half after the accident, and that changed a lot of things. One, I had always been very active in the gym. I think I'd been to the gym maybe 5 days a week for like years before that. And I had to change completely how I worked out, right? There's no more leg press, right? You
Yep.
can't push the leg press out because you're pushing that back onto your spine, which is now injured, right? So I had to relearn how to work out, and that caused me to like partially caused me to gain weight. Then I got kind of more bummed out, and then I like started drinking a lot of wine, and it was just not good. It was in like this cycle. And so like a year and a half after that, like I was just in a terrible place. I remember this like hurricane came through the area, and I was just super miserable. We had to evacuate. It just sucked. And I I finally was like, you know what, I need to call somebody. And that's when I got therapy and was diagnosed with depression. And I've been on now an antidepressant medication ever since. And I was
Yeah.
in therapy for years after that. And so there's this whole side of it too. And none of that's in the settlement either. None
Yeah.
of that
No,
is
I
covered.
think yeah, I think not only is it not in the settlement, your personal injury lawyer also, because it's not in the settlement, doesn't really care about it, unfortunately. I've rarely heard of personal injury lawyers that offer mental health services or support who warn their clients about this perilous journey. There's a statistic that's really ominous that people after accidents are 5 times more likely to commit suicide in the years after their accident. 5 times more likely. That's tragic. That's terrible. We have to do something about that.
Yeah.
And your example, I think, is really resonant and goes again to show that the current way of dealing with innocent people after an accident, like you, is insufficient, and we need to change it. And I'm highly skeptical that the political environment will change it because the PI bar has a massive lobby. And so that change has to come from the free market. And Mighty is really the first company that is really challenging the status quo of personal injury lawyers and trying to create a new way of working and charging and offering services. And one of the things we're most proud of is our focus on mental health because it's as important as so many of these other aspects that most people focus on. And we kind of stand alone focusing on that.
So you mentioned a couple of things, Josh, that people should do once they've been in an accident. What else? Do you have anything else to add for people that maybe they're going to remember one or two things from this conversation, and they're in an accident in 6 months or a year or 2 years, or maybe somebody they know and love is. What should they be doing to protect themselves financially and from the financial impacts of these accidents?
Yeah, so great question. Just to do a small plug for myself, I've started to do TikTok videos and YouTube videos that actually give people these exact tips. And there are dozens or hundreds of them. And I'm slowly going to be adding more and more in order to help educate people. But I think the first step is actually to get educated and to understand what matters in a personal injury case and what doesn't. And you should not just call the first personal injury billboard you see or TV jingle that you like and call the number and sign up with them. You should understand what personal injury lawyers do, what they charge, how they're different from one another, and you should be discerning and choose accordingly. Well, of course, then the next question is, well, discerning about what? What are the things that matter? What are the things that are actually important? The most important thing is that you find a personal injury lawyer whose incentives are aligned with your incentives. And there's a common understanding of personal injury that the lawyer is taking a bet on your case because they make a contingency and because they make a percentage of your total settlement, that lawyer's incentives are perfectly aligned with their clients. And nothing can be further from the truth. And one of the reasons is that the lawyer does make money on the total settlement. They get a percentage of that. But as we learned from you, Lauren, the client only gets what's left after all of the expenses are paid. And those numbers can often be very, very different from one another.
Yeah.
And so one thing I would look for in a personal injury lawyer is a lawyer who talks about these dynamics openly and who acknowledges them and who doesn't, for example, try and talk about these big settlements that they got for their clients. Oh, I got $125,000 from Lauren who got rear-ended. Well, we now know that Lauren only got 30,000 of that, and the lawyer is off telling everyone it's 125. So I think the first is making sure that their incentives are aligned with theirs. Second is I think it's good for people to understand the strength of their case. And they can even negotiate with their personal injury lawyer, which is not something that most people know to do. But personal injury lawyers make a lot of money. There's a reason that they often live in mansions and drive fancy cars. And it's because cases are very profitable. And there are often opportunities, especially for people with really clear cut, good cases, to actually negotiate their fees down. And so one of the things I tell people is to make sure that your lawyer has a fee schedule that their fee goes down as the value of your case goes up. So a case that settles for $2 million is not usually 10 times the amount of work as a case that settles for 200,000, and the lawyer shouldn't get paid 10 times as much just because they're able to settle it. So I think that's one example. Another example is a lot of people actually will get a settlement offer from an insurance company before they ever hire a lawyer. And you'll want to make sure that your lawyer doesn't actually get paid unless they're able to improve on that offer. I've heard of really terrible examples, and these are not few and far between. This is actually happens all the time, where people will actually be worse off from hiring a personal injury lawyer, and they would have been better off had they just settled directly. I would also make sure that the doctors you're going to are highly qualified, and that you don't actually get more treatment than you need because you think that the value of your case is going to go up. You should get the treatment you need to get medically and physically and mentally better. And you should not think about the fact that your case is going to go up because, as we learned from your case, Lauren, and this is true of most every case, you actually have to pay those bills out of your settlement. And so doing more treatment and having a higher gross settlement doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to have a higher net settlement. So I think those are a few of the things that I would look out for. And I'll just give you one more. One of the things that we do at Mighty is we let everybody try our service for 60 days, and they can leave anytime without ever owing us anything. And we are charging contingency like everyone else. Our fee is lower than the industry average or the industry standard, but we want to make sure that we're not overselling people by letting people actually see what it's like to work with us. And so, see if your lawyer that you're talking to allows you to walk away after a week, after a month, after 2 months, like we do. That will really show you that they stand behind their service and put their money where their mouth is.
Those are great. I think what you said there makes so much sense where why would my $125,000 settlement not pay my bills and then the lawyer and me with what's left? Why would the lawyer get paid first? That makes so much sense. And like I'm retroactively mad about it.
What we do at
Go.
Mighty, which is really unique, Mighty Law is a law firm that we are affiliated with that has amazing lawyers, and there's no common ownership between Mighty and Mighty Law, but we work closely together. And Mighty Law has a set of standards and code of conduct that puts in writing for all of its clients. And Mighty Law does something really, really cool. They actually will share in the costs of your medical, the ones that are on lien and letter of protection with you. And they'll take out a percentage, 10% of those costs, and decrease their fee by it. And that is for two main reasons. One is so you can have more money in your pocket, but also it aligns the incentives of the lawyer with yours to make sure that they're not sending you to, for example, medical providers who overtreat without you realizing.
Yeah, because then they have to pay some of it.
Exactly.
So one thing I did, I just want to circle back to what I did with my like 38, 40. I can't remember exactly how much it was, but upper 30s, I think, $1,000. And just for everybody's information, what I did was I sold my first house, which was my first rental at the time. I had a primary, and then I had kept my first house and was renting it out. I sold that, took that equity, combined it with this $38,000 and paid cash for a duplex so that I would cash flow more money than I was from the single family, so that it would at least pay my few $100 a month of extra stuff that I had going on. So that was something that I did end up doing to try to increase my cash flow, was trade up from a single family to a duplex and get rid of a mortgage at the same time.
That's awesome. Yeah, no, I think that's a great thing you did. And if it was in 2019 or right, you must have gotten an amazing deal compared to today.
It was in 2019. I sold that duplex. I did a 1031 exchange into a 6 unit last year, and
Congrats! Wow.
have since hit financial independence because of that 6 unit. And so, in a weird way, my car accident really made me think about finances more. I was already kind of coming into that, already very mindful of that, already had the rental property, right? But I suddenly had a very tangible way to look at my bills are going up by, say, $300 a month with this lump sum issue in the future. And I made it like a personal finance problem, sort of, and tried to figure out a way to solve it. I think if I did the net present value on it, it would not be good. It would not be favorable to me. And I think I spent a lot of time being depressed and going to therapy and kind of doing the woe is me thing. Why did this happen to me? No other 26-year-olds I know have back pain, and nobody really around you understands what you're going through. And So, in a lot of ways, the accident and that physical trauma and the mental trauma that resulted from that is it's a big part of who I am. I think I handled it okay. I think even with what I learned today, I could have handled it better. And I hope that listeners get a lot out of this if, God forbid, this happens to them or somebody they love. So, Josh, why don't you tell people how to get in touch with you and how to watch those videos that you were talking about?
Yeah, our website's really easy to remember. It's mighty.com. We also have a YouTube channel. My name is hard to spell, but it's Joshua Schwadron, Schwadron, and I post on TikTok and Twitter and LinkedIn, and people can follow me there. And we are telling the truth about personal injury, and we are educating consumers about things that they need to know after an accident that they can't today find out from personal injury lawyers who have misaligned incentives with them. And so we're really excited to be consumer focused, and really appreciate the opportunity to talk to your listeners to make sure that they learn from your experiences and ours, and they're able to actually recover after an accident, which is really the goal.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Josh, for coming on.
Thank you, Lauren.
Everybody, you can follow me on Twitter at Adulting is Easy. I started a YouTube channel, as I mentioned at the top. Some of you may be watching my face right now. I'm also on Facebook. You can email me at realadultingiseasy@gmail.com. Thanks again for listening, everybody. Hopefully, Josh and I have made adulting a little easier for you.